Good morning, this October 31st. Let's get right to the top three items. So, in Michigan, this morning, the FBI thwarted a potential terrorist attack and arrested multiple subjects in Michigan who are allegedly plotting a violent attack over Halloween weekend. Moving on to Venezuela. GPS jamming around Venezuela has been reported. U.S. President Donald J. Trump denies media reports from earlier today regarding Venezuela, telling reporters aboard Air Force One that he has not yet made a decision about and is not currently considering military strikes against Venezuela. Now, moving on to the big headline out of Moscow. Russia plans to issue its first yuan denominated bonds on the domestic market this year. Now, let's continue with the briefs in Puerto Rico. A lot of U.S. Air Force planes went to Puerto Rico yesterday, and that information was saved on flight data radar 24. Okay, so now continuing with Puerto Rico, USA just closed off the airspace near Puerto Rico with a NOTAM announcing hot pit refueling at the local airport. Hot pit refueling means aircraft are refueled with their engines still running so they can take off quickly again. Appears it's going to be a long night ahead for Maduro because things are sus. Now let's move on to Washington, D.C. According to the American newspaper Miami Herald, the United States has already decided to carry out strikes on Venezuelan military targets. The article states that airstrikes may commence within the next few hours or days, and their objective will be the elimination of the cartel leadership. Reportedly, the assaults may begin as a combined operation involving both U.S. air and naval forces. The principal targets are Venezuelan military bases and seaports used by the Sun Cartel, a Venezuelan narcotics trafficking organization which the United States alleges is led by President Maduro and senior members of his regime. Now, moving on to Poland. Poland scrambled fighter jets for the third time in 3 days over Russian reconnaissance plane over the Baltic. On the morning of October 31st, the Polish Air Force again intercepted a Russian Tu-20 over the Baltic Sea. The Polish Armed Forces Operational Command told their local political newspaper. The aircraft was flying without a filed flight plan and with its transponder off, violating international safety rules. Similar incidences with the same type of aircraft were reported on October 29th and the 30th. Moving on to Lithuania. Lithuanian railways suspend transit of Russian oil due to U.S. and British sanctions. After November 21st, no more transportation of Luk oil or Rosneft products through the country will take place. Now, moving back to Moscow, we'll sit with Putin, make a decision, and fire the Orishnik. Lukashenko threatens Europe with ballistic missiles. The Belarusian dictator confirmed that the Orish missile system will enter combat duty in Belarus in December. It's a terrible weapon. It will go on combat duty in December. Why? I want them, the Western countries, to understand that we can fire if things go badly. We'll sit with Putin, make a decision, and fire. So don't provoke us. After all, the war in Ukraine started this way. In Donbass, Russian speakers were oppressed, killed, and persecuted. I witnessed all this, the dictator said. Now, moving on to some brief Middle East headlines. Israel's reportedly alarmed as a new intelligence shows Hezbollah rapidly rearming with rockets, air tank missiles, and artillery. According to the Wall Street Journal, the group is smuggling weapons through Syrian routes, seaports, and producing some itself. Despite Israel's over 1,000 strikes and support for Lebanese disarmament, Hezbollah insists its arsenal is needed to protect Lebanon's sovereignty. Continuing with Lebanon, Lebanon signed on to the cessation of hostilities, which stipulates disarming Hezbollah, but has not upheld its commitment, forcing Israel to do Beirut's job. Now, let's get into some more details on the Michigan terror plot. Patel speaking, and I'm going to read this off because it's way too much information and it's easier for me to get into the nitty gritty scripted. So, just for full transparency, I am reading this stuff off because I want to be able to get you the information, read you the headlines, get you through the headlines, then get you to the top nitty gritty details of some of those headlines. So, again, we're going to start off with the Michigan terror plot foiled and it's in depth. So, this morning, Patel speaking in DC, which he was referencing to a public X post from this morning, which announced FBI arrest tied to a foil terror plot. The phrasing "they've all been arrested" is an exaggerated summary of Patel's words, meaning arrested multiple subjects, amped up the virality on right leaning outlets amid Patel's ongoing controversies. The core announcement: what happened? Patel revealed that the FBI thwarted a potential terrorist attack by arresting multiple subjects, meaning suspects, in Michigan earlier today. The plot allegedly targeted a violent attack over Halloween weekend, with raids hitting 3 homes in the Dearborn and Inkster areas, a region with a large Arab American community, which could add political layers. Patel's exact quote: "This morning, the FBI thwarted a potential terrorist attack and arrested multiple subjects in Michigan who were allegedly plotting a violent attack over this coming Halloween weekend. More details to come. Thanks to the men and women of the FBI and law enforcement everywhere standing guard 24/7 and crushing our mission to defend the homeland." So, what are the details so far? No names, charges, or group affiliations have been released yet. More details to come suggest a presser or affidavit soon. Michigan governor wasn't pre-notified, which the article notes as a point of tension, echoing past FBI state frictions. And if there's a press conference or any updated information, I'll be sure to get a video out with that follow-up. Now let's move on to Venezuela GPS jamming in depth. So Venezuela GPA jamming. What is the information on this? The current situation and the implications. Overview of the GPS jamming in Venezuela, meaning there are credible reports indicating that GPS jamming and interference has been occurring in and around Venezuela, and I've been able to confirm this as a fact, particularly along its eastern coast and the broader Caribbean region. These incidents have been documented as recently as today through open source intelligence tracking tool, also known as OSINT, flight data monitors, and discussions on social media by aviation and political observers. While mainstream media, Western media, may not extensively cover these disruptions, real-time signal monitoring confirms their presence and aligns them with patterns seen in other high-tension regions. Now, what is the key evidence of this jamming activity? Multiple OSINT reports have identified heavy GPS ADS-B signal jamming in eastern Venezuela, specifically around, I can't pronounce this, Matoran, Ciudad uh, Guayna, and the states of Monagas and Bolivar. This interference has also extended to nearby areas such as Trinidad and Tobago and the Los Roques Archipelago, which, with incidents reported between October 29th and October 31st. Earlier in September, there were spikes in jamming activity across the Caribbean, particularly during periods of heightened U.S.-Venezuela tensions. These incidences affected regions near Puerto Rico and international waters. Now, global tracking platforms like GPSjam.org display daily interference maps, while public summaries for 2025 data on Venezuela and the Caribbean remain limited, likely due to the sporadic nature of these events and their connection to local military operations rather than major conflicts. The patterns are recognizable. Aviation authorities and shipping companies have observed similar disruptions in the region, reflecting the broader global trend of approximately 1,000 daily GPS interference incidences in 2025. Impacts of this GPS jamming. GPS jamming works by broadcasting powerful radio noise on the same frequencies used by GPS satellites, which overwhelms receivers and prevents devices from accurately locking onto satellite signals. This form of interference is not hacking, but rather a denial of service tactic that causes devices to lose their ability to triangulate position. Navigation failures. Aircraft shifts and drones must resort to backup navigation systems, such as inertial guidance, paper charts, or VOR beacons. In the busy Caribbean shipping lanes, especially those transporting Venezuelan oil, this increases the risk of collisions. For example, vessels may appear miles off from their actual location on these AIS charts. Safety and economic impacts. The effects include delays for flights, such as those traveling from the capital to Trinidad, disruptions to fishing and drone operations, and higher fuel costs due to manual rerouting. In several cases, this GPS jamming contributes to accidents, as is demonstrated by a 2024 jet crash in Azerbaijan linked to such interference, which Putin recently has apologized for. Civilian effects. While civilians may experience glitches in GPS based apps like Google Maps or ride sharing platforms, most significant impacts are only really felt in the aviation and maritime sectors. So, what is the broader implication here? The occurrence of GPS jamming highlights the vulnerabilities present in these current navigation systems. Now, let's kind of look at the reasons for this jamming. Well, the GPS jamming in Venezuela is closely tied to escalating tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela this year. It is likely employed as a defensive electronic warfare measure by the Maduro government. Geopolitical triggers. These incidences often coincide with U.S. military aircraft entering airspace claimed by Venezuela, and amid ongoing disputes over elections, oil sanctions, and migration issues. Reports suggest the Venezuelan government views GPS denial as a countermeasure to precision-guided weapons such as the Tomahawk missiles that do rely on GPS. Military activity. The jamming is explicitly linked to Venezuelan military exercises or readiness drills in the oil-rich Orinoco Belt, a region frequently associated with such operations. Foreign support. Russia has provided electronic warfare technology to Venezuela since 2019, and the tactics used mirror those observed in the Baltic region. So what is the global context here, folks? The pattern of incidences in Venezuela fits with the global trend of around 700 to 1,000 daily GPS jamming events, often as a byproduct of military posturing near conflict zones. While Venezuela denies any hostile intent, the observed patterns suggest the jamming is a deliberate deterrent. Should diplomatic tensions ease, the frequency of this GPS jamming should be expected to decline. For ongoing monitor, I will continue to look at the tracking of these jams and update accordingly in future videos. Now, let's get into the next in-depth item. The Moscow First Yuan-denominated bonds in depth. So again, I'm going to read this off to you because it's just way too much. But it's very informative because when you have a headline, okay, such as that, I want to make sure that, we all understand what that headline actually means and what it means to world conflicts. So Russia does plan to issue its first yuan-denominated bond on the domestic market this year. What does this mean? In simple terms, this announcement signals Russia's push to diversify its financial tools away from Western currencies like the US dollar by issuing government bonds, essentially IOUs for borrowed money, that are priced, sold, and repaid in Chinese yuan, which is the RMB. China's currency directly on Russia's stock exchanges like the Moscow Exchange. This would be the first time the Russian government has done this domestically as opposed to abroad, like in China's panda bond market. The plan, reported today, October 31st, aims to tap into the huge pool of yuan held by Russian banks and investors from booming trade with China. Now, what is the background here? Why is Russia doing this now? Well, it's simply put, it's sanctions pressure. Since the sanctions, and then recently with Trump up the sanctions along with Britain, okay, I'm going to skip some of this stuff. So that's really what that part boils down to, is because of the sanction on oil and gas and exports and things of that nature. Now, what does this mean? Well, Russia's 2025 budget deficit is growing, so it needs to borrow more, up to 10 trillion rubles. High ruble denominated bond yields around 14 to 15% make domestic borrowing expensive, but these bonds could attract cheaper Chinese capital. Building momentum. This follows corporate moves and September 2025 talks of linking Russian and Chinese markets for easier access. It's also tied to BRICS' effort to boost local currency finance. So, what are the implications for Russia here? Well, it's going to provide an economic boost, which they need desperately. It lets Russia cycle the liquidity into infrastructure or defense without flooding the market with rubles, which they have been doing previously, and it's really weakened the currency. Expect issuance sizes in the billions and maturities of 3 to 10 years. Investor appeal targets Russian firms and banks holding this currency, plus Chinese buyers for cross-border links, potentially lowering borrowing costs versus the ruble bonds. And really, overall, it's a strategic low drama move into currency wars. It isn't revolutionary, but a clear step toward financial sovereignty is where I got some of this information. So with that said, that's all I have to report this midday on October 31st. And if you enjoyed this content, such as this in short formats, hit the subscribe, like, and notification bell so we can deliver that to you timely.